Okay. Hello and welcome to Beyond Reproach. This is Stephanie Domingo.
And Tux Lurzel.
Yeah, we are here with a summer break re-release.
Together.
Yes. There was an extra Monday in August, so we decided to take this opportunity for a bonus episode for y'all to celebrate our late great podfather, Tim.
Yes, everything Tim.
Yeah, he really helps craft what Beyond Reproach is. Like, he guided us in such a instrumental way in the beginning.
He was with us from the very beginning.
Yeah,
he was there
our first episode.
But like, he was there in the planning stages before our first episode. He literally was the podfather. He really helped craft what Beyond Reproach became in a way that like
pivotal.
We didn't know what it was going to be.
He helped us like find our voice.
Absolutely.
In a way that our show wouldn't exist without him, and it wouldn't sound the way we wouldn't have a solitary like message without him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our tone
we are
without him.
Eternally grateful to Tim. And we are bummed that he's no longer with us, but we're so proud and so happy for him and all of the things that he's doing.
Yes, he's doing what he needs to be doing, and he helped us for a really long time.
Absolutely.
And we will be forever grateful for his tutelage.
Tutelage. Toot on, Tim. Toot on.
So we are re-releasing the episode that he did with me, actually. I did the scandal of Fred Hampton.
Yes.
And he did the story of Red Emma.
Yeah, this was back in season 3 when we were still doing two stories per episode.
Yeah. Back in the day.
Yeah.
He told a story that feels very relevant, especially now with the fights, the labor fights that we are having currently. There's always been pushback against immigrants.
Yes.
And especially immigrants who try to organize for their rights.
And try to improve this country and make it better for everyone. The American dream, try to make the American dream possible for all Americans. We can't have that.
No. But this was pre-FBI. This was when J. Edgar Hoover was really...
Fucking J. Hoove.
Yeah, J. Hoover. He was running what would later become the FBI and just doing the most harm,
all the fuck shit.
Yeah,
he's the worst. Yeah,
but he was at the helm for this Red Scare.
Yeah, absolutely. This story also, I feel like there's a lot of other things going on in this story that we may come back to, even though we haven't done it yet. At some point I feel like we should talk about the Haymarket affair. Yeah. We need to do a story about J. Hoove.
Oh yeah. Oh, J. Hoove is mine.
Yeah, okay. He's mine's.
Yeah, he's mine's. I don't want to. I was gonna say something, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna save that joke for when I do it because it's gonna land spectacularly.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a really, really. Obviously, yes, we want to celebrate Tim, but this is a phenomenal episode, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. It's so much fun. We get a little sloppy drunk, especially me, because I didn't have a story to tell that week, and
Tux didn't have any homework, so he's just like, "Yay, school's out!"
Let loose. I undid my belt and
yes. It's your what is that fucking cocktail?
The monkey gland.
The monkey gland.
Yeah. Yeah. Sidecar.
The sidecar is your monkey gland.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you guys thoroughly enjoy this.
Yes, it's a good one.
Episode.
It's a really good one.
And pour one out for the podfather.
Yeah, Tim, we love you.
But also, we're so excited to talk about our new audio editor.
Yes.
We will talk about him very soon. In 1 week, there will be a new episode next Monday, and we will be talking about our new audio editor very soon.
He's great.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Enjoy this episode.
Bye, y'all.
And thanks again, Tim.
Yes.
Bye.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington Because be a married man and never, never tell a lie.
Okay, so I have a story, and bizarrely, I sort of chose a story which is also focused on one person who had a run-in with the government
What?
and was an inspiration of her time. I want to tell you the story of Red Emma and the Palmer raids.
I know nothing about
Have
this.
you heard of the
Red Emma and
Palmer
the Palmer
I've
raids?
never
No.
heard of either. This is exciting.
Okay, so let's make a toast
Ooh, you having a toast.
to brilliant immigrants who built this nation
Yeah.
and the government that deports them.
Ooh, okay.
Ugh, that's
Good
a dark
times.
toast. This drink is strong, Tux.
It is.
I really like it, though, I have to say.
I do too, but
I mean, you've been drinking it constantly. I've been trying to pace myself.
Well, now you're done
Oh,
talking, so loosen those jaw gums.
I feel it.
I love that jaw gums are, that's like our thing now.
Okay, so the Palmer raids were a series of raids which were executed by the American government between November 1919 and February 1920. The raids largely targeted immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe
I'm not shocked by that.
who were suspected of being, quote, radical activists. They were led by the then Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer and his newly deputized right-hand man, the fresh-faced 24-year-old J. Edgar Hoover,
Boo.
who was anxious to begin a career of abusing his power as the head of the Justice Department's new General Intelligence Division.
He was put in charge when he was 24.
And he was 24 years old.
Wow.
The General Intelligence Division
Jesus.
is what went on to become the FBI.
Jesus.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is pre-FBI.
Yeah. So between November 1919 and February 1920, almost 10,000 people were rounded up and arrested in the Palmer raids in 70 cities across the United States. They were held in jails and detention centers with little or no due process. This was during the first and original Red Scare in the United States. The Attorney General claimed to be targeting Russian communist sympathizers.
The Reds.
The Reds.
Get 'em.
But many of those arrested were labor leaders, immigrant workers,
Close enough.
and in some cases, students who happened to be taking Russian language classes in the wrong building at the wrong time.
Are you serious?
God.
Are you serious though?
Among other things, like
What?
10,000 people were arrested. They had carte blanche to just
Just a
arrest
wide
everyone.
net. Just
Yeah.
anyone that had that wrong look about them.
Yeah, he looks Russian. Get him.
His eyes are real squinty, you guys. Look at him.
I saw him reading Dostoevsky.
That's
I'm in jail.
So most of the people arrested were eventually released once human rights lawyers and the Labor Department got involved. However, of those arrested, 257 were held without trial on Ellis Island off the coast of Manhattan, their crime being nothing more than being immigrants in the United States who were suspected of radical thinking.
Jeez.
Was there something weird happening on Ellis Island that it was like extrajudicial? Was it like Guantanamo Bay somehow?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because it was like where immigrants were like not quite citizens yet. They thought it was like,
No.
Oh,
oh,
okay.
okay.
My next sentence on my outline is, I'll get into the details of how this happened
Oh,
later.
okay.
They basically held people everywhere, but it was on Ellis Island where this group of 257 immigrants were awoken from their cells one night and loaded under the cover of darkness onto a boat called the USS Buford, also known as the Soviet Ark, and were deported across the ocean, put onto a train in Finland,
What?
and then dumped
Stop it.
unceremoniously
No.
into the USSR.
I was just about to ask,
Are
are,
you
they putting them in
fucking kidding
Russia?
me?
They're putting them in the USSR,
Yes.
which in 1920 was a newly declared republic
Yeah.
from the Russian Empire. And it was still broiling over with food shortages, political tensions, and protests.
Yeah, that's where you throw people away.
Yeah.
I don't
okay?
know what to say. These people
like,
were like, just, hey, wake up. You're going to Russia.
It was not a great place
trial.
to be at the moment.
Or
and,
USSR.
and it was kind of understood to be, I couldn't find any quotes about this, but it was kind of understood to be Woodrow Wilson's kind of like, fuck you to the USSR, like, here's a present for you. Take all of our like Russian sympathizers and you can have them.
Woodrow Wilson, we haven't gotten to him yet, but he's a mess. He was a mess. You've listened to that Ashley Flowers. What is
Very
that?
presidential.
Very presidential.
Wonderful podcast.
She does an episode on Woodrow Wilson that's like telling. Okay. He was a
progressive,
not nerdy, but like sort of like
bookish.
Yeah, kind of
like
bookish
an intellectual.
Intellectual.
Yeah.
Thank you. But then like had a hard on for the KKK and was like,
I mean, when you get a taste of that sweet, sweet power,
yeah,
you know.
So,
sorry.
While the Palmer raids were undoubtedly scandalous, looking back, they're not super surprising or unprecedented in U.S. history. It seems like our government is always finding a loophole to deport whatever group of immigrants it decides are unsavory at the given moment for their own political reasons. So, while I want to talk about the scandalous Palmer raids, I also want to talk about the most prominent figure who was deported on the Soviet Ark, the USS Buford. The once famous and now forgotten anarchist giant, an outspoken advocate for workers' rights and women's rights, Emma Goldman.
Ooh, yeah.
Or Red Emma. Have you heard of Red Emma?
I've heard of Emma Goldman.
Yeah,
I didn't know that she was called Red Emma.
I'm not surprised by that.
I love it.
Like red pepper.
Yeah, of course. I'm just like, does he have red hair? Like, my dumb ass is. Yeah. You're like, he's obviously a red. I'm just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's a ginger.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I'm like, oh, he has freckles. It's cute.
No.
He's like Prince Harry.
He's a scary red.
Who is this?
Oh, you don't remember Red
From the
Pepper?
Henry Wallace story.
Oh,
He's the one who was supposed to get to the mic
I do remember.
as you edited the whole episode. What do you do?
So the scandal for me, or the second scandal for me, the scandal within the scandal for me, is the historical erasure of Emma Goldman in U.S. history. She's sort of had like a revival in recent years, but it's crazy to me that she's not like a household name.
Yeah.
She's so interesting and such a controversial figure that if I had been taught about her in high school, I think I would have been like super into U.S. history from a very young age.
That's kind of this podcast. I feel like if this is the way school was taught, we would all love history.
Like, tell us about the controversial figures. Like, we want to know about them. They're the ones who shaped the country.
But they don't want us to know.
Yeah, they
these
don't want
people.
us to know about like the struggle.
Yeah.
To like make this place less of a lie.
Yeah. And so, just to be clear, though, she's not a saint.
Yeah.
No one is.
Far from a saint.
Yeah, but I think that women always have to be saints, like better than.
Yeah. Anyone
Like
that's not a
Hillary
white man
Clinton.
or a straight
It's
white
like, oh,
man.
she's no saint, and it's like, no one is.
Is
no
Trump?
one is.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Of course he's not.
Yeah.
But you're
But
not
no
saying
one's
that about
asking
him.
him to be.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, she really was not a saint.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
mean-
sure.
She was implicated in at least 2 assassination attempts that I read about.
Who is she trying to kill, though?
They deserved
Most
it.
notably,
I was about to say.
most notably, the successful assassination of William McKinley, the 25th president of the United States.
He was from Ohio, you guys.
She's hooked up with Leon Czolgosz.
So we'll get to that in a minute.
This is exciting.
This is exciting.
As I said, she was a
know.
famous anarchist. She was also a prolific writer and speaker. She published a regular magazine called Mother Earth, which was the most popular radical progressive magazine of its time. She traveled the country speaking to and educating women about this new thing called birth control, an activity which was illegal at the time.
What year was this?
This was,
You're like, it was 2020.
I mean, she was doing this for years and years, so probably between, safe bet, 1900 to 1910.
They had birth control back then.
She was on the forefront of people traveling the country talking to women about it.
That's how Planned Parenthood was formed, was like early 20th century women like trying to get birth control. But it was very primitive birth control back then.
Yeah.
It was like better
But it was
than nothing.
and it was some form of women able to take control of
Autonomy.
Of their bodies.
exactly. But it was illegal to speak out about birth control at the time. She did it anyway. She was anti-American imperialism. She was anti-military. She spoke out against the United States' involvement in international conflict.
Hell yes.
She also spoke out against the Conscription Act, which was essentially the military draft of her day. This was also illegal and got her arrested. She was a vocal advocate of unions and workers' rights, and not some workers, but all workers, including Asian and European immigrants, Black Americans, and women. She was crazy enough to think that the people have the power and can build a society on a voluntary and cooperative basis
Wow, it sounds
without
like she was
recourse
speaking that.
to force or compulsion. And this is the definition of anarchy.
Yeah, we can't have none of that.
No. And for this, she was arrested and expelled from the country. So I've said she was an anarchist. Do we know what anarchy is? I feel like Americans have an idea of what anarchy is, which is not what
Breaking
anarchy
CVS's windows,
is, right?
right? I think so.
I mean, I think a
right?
lot of people think that it's just like complete lawlessness and like chaos.
But we've
that's
never
not-
seen that, but we're
yeah.
always talking about it.
Well, that's because we want it to be painted as this sort of like boogeyman. Stephanie and our friend Diana and I recently
Stop
took
telling
one
on
of this.
me.
We recently took this
Did
sort
you
of
burn
like,
down a CVS?
Yes, we did. Actually, it was a Target, but I needed some measuring spoons, and they were trying to charge me for them.
I wanted a lamp.
They kept charging me for more and more things that were in my basket.
Yes. But so we took this sort of like political spectrum test that like places you on a grid of like, are you socialist, libertarian, authoritarian? But then one of them is sort of like, it placed us in this sort of like libertarian anarchist section. It was like, really?
That
neither
hurt
of
my
those
feelings.
things.
Yeah. I'm like, this test is garbage.
Yeah. But it's just the
Like,
name
don't
the names
call me a
of them.
libertarian.
I know.
Like,
How
I'm fine with
dare you.
anarchists. Like,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. Like,
Yeah. Call me a
Yes,
socialist,
please.
call me an anarchist,
Yeah.
fine. How dare you call me a libertarian?
I'm not a straight white man. Get out of here.
I'm going to read the definition of what an anarchist is.
Okay.
It is anarchy is a belief in the abolition of all government and the organization of society on a voluntary, cooperative basis without recourse to force or compulsion, which to me says that is like community organizing.
Thank you. I'm like, okay, I guess I am. And yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of knew this because I know some people who consider themselves anarchists. And I was like, you're just community organizers. You are people who don't believe in the government taking its sweet time to enforce rules. And you just want to do it in your own community right now.
I did not know that it was an idea. I thought it was an action.
Right.
Like you had to do something.
And I think the technical definition of an anarchist and anarchy, those might be different. There definitely have been skewed definitions put out throughout the years.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's by design. They want people to think that
Definitely.
anarchists want anarchy.
Yeah.
And those are two completely different concepts. Anarchy is like complete chaos and lawlessness and danger and madness. And
it also makes the philosophical idea of anarchy way less interesting.
Totally.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to start just by telling the story of Emma Goldman. I took a slightly different tact from you because I'm not going to tell about the moment. I just kind of want to tell her background because she's such a force and I feel like she deserves to have her story told.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
she wasn't executed by the state. So you can just, tell her story.
It's just ejected by the state, literally.
But she lived to tell her tale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and she did. She wrote an autobiography, which
Oh, of
after
course.
learning about
Yeah.
this story, I'm totally going to read her autobiography.
Same.
So Emma Goldman was aware of the struggle between working people and the powers that be from a very young age. She recounts when she was 5 or 6, she saw a servant boy being whipped, and this kind of woke her up to the fact that there was a difference between them and me. She was born into a conservative Orthodox Jewish family in 1869 in what is now Lithuania, which was then the Russian Empire, pre-USSR, during the reign of Tsar Alexander II. Her father was a monster and an idiot. He invested all of her mother's inheritance into a business which quickly failed.
Magic beans.
Magic beans. He beat his children. He singled out Emma for her outspokenness. Over the course of Goldman's young life, the family moved many times, and in each location, her father would start a new business. And in each location, his business would promptly fail.
They're against him.
Magic cannellini beans. And then we move over here and they're magic black beans.
Emma tried to get an education, but was frequently beaten by her teachers. And
Good
she
Lord.
made a name for
How
herself.
dare you try to learn
Yes,
as a woman?
in a conservative,
Beaten by
Orthodox
her-
Jewish family
yeah.
in the Russian Empire, like in the late 1800s. A lot of anti-Semitism, like
Sure.
not an easy
okay.
life, especially for a female.
Why did she have teachers if they didn't want her to learn that?
Seriously.
Well, because she was outspoken in school. 'Cause
Yeah.
she was
okay.
very smart and she was very like
Asking
questioning everything.
questions.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
and at the
yeah.
age of 7, apparently there was a teacher at her school which was known to molest students like children. And it wasn't until Emma Goldman, a 7-year-old Emma Goldman, came along and she fought back against him and eventually got him fired.
Wow.
Yeah, at the
It's
age of
7.
7. But she was very much like this, again, like Fred Hampton, kind
Yeah.
of this like young prodigy who was in the wrong
Yeah,
place.
unafraid.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to try me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to try you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. 7, though.
7.
Wow.
When she was a teenager, her family moved to St. Petersburg, the very anti-Semitic capital of Russia at the time. She asked her father to help her re-enroll in school, and he reportedly threw her French book into the fireplace and shouted, "Girls do not have to learn much." So, in order to offset her father's failed businesses, she went to work in a corset shop. In this corset shop, at the age of 15, she was forced to regularly interact with sleazy Russian army officers and workmen who were coming in to buy corsets. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that she was sexually assaulted during that time, obviously.
Duh.
Meanwhile, her father was busy arranging a marriage for her at the age of 15 against her wishes. So this is like a snapshot of her childhood. To escape the horrors of her everyday life, she started to self-educate. She read everything she could get her hands on. She became fascinated with political theory after the Tsar got blown up by an assassin's bomb. She got particularly moved by a book called What Is to Be Done by Nikolai Chernyshevsky. This book features a female protagonist who adopts a nihilist philosophy in order to escape her repressive family, and she eventually starts a sewing cooperative. And this winds up sort of being like a loose storyboard for the next part of her life. In the next year, she makes up her mind to join her older sister in immigrating to New York City in the United States of America. Her father, still being a shit, forbids her from going, and Emma tells him that she's either going to New York or she will throw herself from a bridge.
And he's like, bye.
Yeah, and he's like, okay.
Do what you need to do.
So she immigrates to New York at the age of 16. She moves to Rochester, which is a few hours north of New York City, where she finds work as a seamstress, sort of like echoing her favorite book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But this is not like a sewing collective. It's a garment factory, meaning she's working for 10, 12-hour shifts.
Yeah. No windows, like just the worst conditions you've ever seen in
this
your
is like,
fucking life.
Triangle shirtwaist.
Exactly.
factory.
The doors
Exactly,
are
yeah.
locked when you're working.
Yeah, same time period, too, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's not getting paid anything. She's making like $2 a week or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, that's...
But silver lining, while in the factory, she meets a man named Jacob. He shares her love of books. And after a quick 4-month courtship, they get married. Jacob, it should be noted, is an American citizen. So though the immigration laws, which come later in the 19th century, they weren't as strict at this time, she does become a legal U.S. citizen when she marries him.
Okay.
Jacob turns out to be impotent, which she finds out on her wedding night. So their marriage does not last. Goldman is also much more interested in what's going on in the news than her husband.
I mean, who wouldn't be?
I mean,
No
literally,
offense,
this is
but also,
why you should not wait till marriage.
you
to
gotta
have
fuck when
sex.
you meet
Like,
someone and you
yeah.
like them
Yeah.
to know that you're sexually compatible. Duh.
I'm also, knowing her history, I'm like, she waited till marriage. Like, really? So,
But
I don't
what age was she? Was she like 17?
So at this time, yeah, she was. She
it's
must
like, I
have
could
been
wait
like 16
until-
years old.
Oh, well
16
then,
or
yeah,
17.
totally.
Yeah.
I could wait until then.
You've been interested in sex for like all of 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what was going on in the news at the time was something called the Haymarket Affair of 1886. Have you guys heard of the
Yes,
Haymarket
I have.
Affair?
Have you? Yeah, I have heard of it. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were being
No, I have.
sarcastic.
I have, yeah.
Which is rude.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
I'm like, no one has heard of these words that Tim just said because I can't even remember.
So the Haymarket Affair was also, it was in Chicago and Illinois. It took place on May 4th, 1886. At the time, Chicago was a hotbed for the labor movement, and it was advocating on multiple fronts for better working conditions. So there was a strike against one of the large Chicago companies, the International Harvester Company, where workers were trying to get an 8-hour workday. Stories like these were happening all over the country at the time. But in Chicago, the police fired into the crowd of striking workers and they killed several people. So in response,
They were firing first.
they were absolutely firing first. Yeah. And the workers were probably predominantly white, which is why there was no... So in response, several of the prominent anarchists, which were a lot of the labor leaders at the time, came together to create a meeting basically to figure out what they were going to do next. They decided to hold the meeting in the Haymarket Square, and it was a peaceful meeting until the police showed up, at which point somebody threw a bomb and a bomb exploded in the midst of the police.
It was an FBI plant.
So, I mean,
Totally.
but this is what people were wondering about because
Totally.
nobody knows who threw the bomb. It was never determined that it was actually.
It's so incendiary. Like it seems like
it was a plant.
Because they were just.
Because why would you do that unless you want to start shit, which is what they wanted.
And which is what we're still fucking dealing with 100 years later.
It is labeled a terrorist attack, but nobody knows who threw the bomb. Nevertheless, the police need to blame someone, so they round up the 8 most prominent anarchists in the city.
How convenient.
Despite none of them being directly tied to the attack, and charge them all with conspiracy. They are anarchists. Yeah, they are anarchists. Vis-a-vis, they are guilty, and 4 of the men are executed by hanging.
What?
Yeah.
With no
Executed.
proof.
Like, is there a jury? Is this pre-jury? I'm so confused.
It is. They were charged with conspiracy.
And you get hanged for that?
And it was a death sentence. And this set the country on fire.
What the?
There was it was an international sensation. People were decrying the execution all over the place. Emma Goldman heard about the Haymarket Affair, and she's inspired into action. She's like a teenager, but she's like, I'm going to join this movement now. So after a brief attempt to reconcile her relationship with her husband, she leaves Rochester to move to New York City and join the anarchist/workers movement. The Haymarket Affair simultaneously was inspiring another young man named Alexander Berkman. He shared a lot of similarities with Emma Goldman. He was also a recent immigrant from the Russian Empire. He was Emma's same age. He was living in New York. He had been born to a Jewish family and lived for a time in St. Petersburg. Coincidentally, his favorite book was also What Is to Be Done by Nikolai Chernyshevsky. So Emma Goldman flees her impotent husband with $5 and her sewing machine, and she heads to New York City, and she knows nothing about the city, but she's heard of this place called Sasha's Cafe, which is a gathering spot for intellectuals and socialist thinkers. And she goes straight to the cafe, and as if by fate, she meets Alexander Berkman there. And they become fast friends. Neither of them speaks much English at the time, but, they have all of these similar political beliefs. They have all this shared history. They love the same book. And Berkman is already a diehard anarchist who is respected in the community. So that first night that she's in New York, Emma Goldman is brought to hear one of Berkman's idols speak, this man named Johann Most. Johann Most is this giant of the anarchist community at the time for his philosophy called the propaganda of the deed. And so at this point, we should say that while not all anarchists are violent in nature or even believe in violence, hashtag not all anarchists,
Thank you.
Johann Most very much did.
He was doing the most.
Yes. The propaganda of the deed philosophy in a nutshell is the idea that oppressive societies need to be spurred to change by violent action.
He sounds so white.
He sounds like a plant.
He was the white
Wait, what did you say too?
He was the white guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. He also had like a bizarre, crazy childhood and was like disfigured and stuff like this.
Shit.
He died very young because I think he had like some sort of terminal cancer.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at him in his
Holistically,
overarch, it's
yeah.
like, I kind of like...
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's like, I can
like-
die any moment.
Yes.
Therefore,
Let's just
like,
do it.
Yes.
let's blow this shit up.
Yeah.
So Johann Most said the existing system will be quickest and most radically overthrown by the annihilation of its exponents. Therefore, massacres of the enemies of the people must be set into motion. He also distributed a pamphlet which he wrote called The Science of Revolutionary Warfare, which was a how-to manual on the subject of bomb making.
Wow.
I was just going to ask, like, what science? Bomb making.
Bomb making.
Bomb making.
Yes.
Okay.
This is, I think, why anarchists are associated with violence a lot and bombings.
What year was this? This was like
This was-
1900?
This was like 1886,
Wow.
1887.
Okay.
Okay.
Emma, who is still a teenager, full of anger at the injustice of the world, as we all were during
Yeah.
our teen years.
She's smoking Marlboro Reds and listening to Radiohead.
Exactly. Vibing on the Pyramid song.
Drinking every liquor she can find with orange juice.
Yes. I was Emma, in case you haven't figured this out. She was completely taken in by Johann Most's philosophy. He, in turn, was very impressed with her and her intelligence and her tenacity, and he takes her under his wing. He tells her, "You will be me when I am gone," which seems creepy, and begins to tutor her
How
in
old
the
is he?
art of public speaking. But he didn't die like super old, so I think he was probably in his like late 20s,
Oh.
like late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Still, but okay.
Yeah.
That's better than 60s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It is. So he begins to tutor her in the art of public speaking. And this is how Emma Goldman becomes the prolific public speaker, which she's known to be. She's only 17 to 18 at this time, but she has tons of life experience due to her childhood. And when she's put in front of a crowd at the Garment Workers Union back in Rochester, New York, to speak for the first time, she says it's a life-altering experience. She says, quote, "In a flash, I saw it. Every incident of my years in Rochester, the Garson factory, its drudgery and humiliation, the failure of my marriage, the Chicago crime. I began to speak. Words I had never heard myself utter before came pouring forth faster and faster. They came with a passionate intensity. The audience vanished. The hall itself vanished. I was conscious only of my words and of my ecstatic song." The crowds
love
were like
it.
super, super responsive to her.
Yeah.
And before long, she's touring cities all across the United States with Johann Most, speaking to all kinds of like leftist radical groups who support the cause.
I don't want to interrupt.
sure you do.
I interrupt Tux all the time, but I'm like,
That's what we do.
Tim does our bidding, so I need to be respectful.
I appreciate that.
That's what happens when you speak the truth. Like,
Yeah,
people feel it. The end. She was speaking the truth, and people were connecting with the truth.
Totally.
Isn't it weird? Because now we live in like an age where we read a lot of things, and it is, while it's exciting,
You're right.
to hear someone speak
Yeah.
is a whole different thing.
It really is.
It's like a personal experience that
Yeah.
gets you fired up.
Yeah. It's like you feel it in your body.
Yeah.
Like you feel it in your chest. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
It's like listening to Radiohead, sort of.
I feel red,
Drinking
but yes.
Southern Comfort.
Smoking Marlboro Reds. and just feeling it. It's true. Yeah. There's something about just the human voice and just like intonations and just also hearing the truth with the human voice with the intonations. It's so powerful.
It really is.
So powerful.
It hits you in the chest like a shot of Southern Comfort. Down by the dam.
What? The crick, you mean?
No, we would drink it by the dam, Stephanie.
Oh, okay.
At Dragon's Head.
So specific. Thank you.
A weird piece of wood in the forest that looks like a dragon's head. So we all called it Dragon's Head. That's where we would meet up.
I don't even know what this is about anymore. What happened?
About nothing. I'm drunk now.
It's about he had no work to do, therefore he's like, I'm a drink.
Let me wax nostalgic about it.
Covered in shame.
Bathed in his blood.
So while Emma Goldman has a gift for speaking, she's still super young, and so is her haughty boyfriend, Alexander Berkman. So it's not super surprising when she sees a newspaper article detailing how another group of workers are striking now in Homestead, Pennsylvania. They've been locked out of their factory, and several of the workers are then shot by Pinkerton detectives.
Jesus.
Oh, Pinkerton. Yeah.
And she's like, okay, I got to do something about this now. In a nutshell, again, what happened was the negotiations had failed between a steelworkers union and the Carnegie Steel Company in Homestead, Pennsylvania. Henry Clay Frick, the factory's notoriously anti-union manager, hired 300 armed guards from the Pinkerton Detective Agency to break the union's picket lines. But when the Pinkerton guards arrived at the factory on the morning of July 6th, a gunfight broke out.
Of course, yeah.
9 union workers and 7 guards were killed, and it was a 12-hour gunfight.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You pull in the Pinkertons when you want, like, people's skulls to be cracked.
Exactly. Yeah. With the Pinkertons are basically just modern police.
Yeah.
It's like,
They're like a militia
oh, you want someone dead?
Is
We're
like
going to call the police.
outside the law.
Yeah.
That they just call to break strikes and hurt people.
So Goldman and Berkman heard about this, and they decided to put this propaganda of the deed philosophy into action. Remember, again, they're, if not in their teens, in their very early 20s at this point, and they develop a plan to assassinate the factory manager, Henry Clay Frick. Their reasoning is that an assassination will arouse the working class's sympathy, and workers around the world will unite and revolt against the corrupt capitalist system in one fell swoop. In hindsight, Goldman definitely is like, this was a rash plan. I was a teenager.
Yeah.
We were being overzealous, and it was crazy. But
they sound like the Weathermen.
yes, Alexander Berkman goes off to kill Frick. He tries to build a bomb. He doesn't know how to build a bomb, fails dramatically. He buys a gun instead and also buys a knife, and he travels to the factory, tries to get into Frick's office several times, but is rejected, eventually gets in, tries to shoot him, is a terrible aim, so he only shoots him in the shoulder, and then the workmen who he had counted on to rise up in rebellion were like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And grab him. So he tries to stab Frick, but stabs him only in the leg.
What?
The workmen in the factory wind up beating the shit out of him.
Obviously.
And then turning him over to the police. He actually tries to kill himself. That was part of the plan, was that he would commit this suicide afterwards. He tries to swallow some kind of pill he has.
Oh, cyanide,
but,
probably.
But the police just pull it out of his mouth, and they're like, what are you doing?
What a mess.
What
But
a
how
mess.
old is he?
He's early
16?
20s.
Oh,
He- Yeah, this is a few years later.
Okay, so he's like Fred Hampton minus the brains, and he's just violent for no reason.
he's kind of brainwashed by this guy, Johann Most, who was this anarchist hero of his talking about the propaganda of the deed.
But he's telling them to shoot and stab people?
He's telling them that a dramatic action is needed in order to spur change. And Emma Goldman stays behind, and she is going to write a pamphlet and distribute it to the people describing what the action was to inspire the workers.
But she knew what they were doing, right?
She did, yeah.
He was doing, right? Okay.
After this happens, he's arrested. He's sentenced to 22 years in jail. Then the police come. They ransack their apartment, but they can't find anything to say that she was actually involved in this.
Okay.
So nothing happens.
I like that she has like due process.
Yes. At this point, she has
don't
due
know why.
process. And that is assassination plot number 1. And there are 2 assassination plots, if you'll remember.
I remember.
So, and this assassination plot, she definitely did plan. She should have been held accountable for. During the following year, like right after this, the Panic of 1893 began. This was a major like depression event in U.S. history. She is like a public speaker of note in the area now, so she continues delivering fiery addresses to now unemployed workers. And she quickly gets arrested for inciting to riot. This was after she was speaking in Union Square in New York City.
Oh.
She told 3,000 people to go to the factories and demand work. If they don't give you work, demand bread. If they give you neither, take the bread.
Wow.
And
Do they have bread at factories?
at bread factories.
You know what
the
they
bread
meant.
factory.
They're just going to the bread factories.
I want bread.
So she is sent to prison for 1 year for this. In prison
For a full year, though?
for a full year because she.
I mean, she was inciting violence, I guess, against, bread
bread?
factories.
Violence against bread.
We need to defend bread
Yeah,
at all
I mean-
costs. Like, if you're anti-bread, then I'm anti-you.
She's pro-bread. She's just pro-eating the bread.
Oh, well, same. Bread is
She's all
delicious.
about bread distribution.
But she was from like the Russian Empire where there were bread lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was like, this is the same thing that is happening to the United States now. We need to make sure we have bread rations for the people.
Yeah.
It's like she saw into the future.
Yeah, I mean, we're being silly about it, but like, she's not wrong.
So she goes to jail. And because she's a hero, she starts reading her philosophy like blossoms. She reads Thoreau and Emerson and all of these American philosophers. And she also reads John Stuart Mill, who talks a lot about like American capitalism. All of these wind up influencing her future, more matured philosophy. And really, like, Emma Goldman is like a study on someone who is like a mover of people, who learns lessons throughout her life, but not without making mistakes.
Sure.
Of course, that's how you learn, though.
Yeah,
That's how you learn.
Nobody grows without making
Yeah.
mistakes.
So while she's in jail, she gets rheumatism. The visiting doctor who came in to treat her, like, inspired her to become a doctor and study medicine.
Really?
Yes. So she started like studying medicine while she was in jail, studying philosophy while she was in jail. And then Nellie Bly, have you heard of Nellie Bly?
Who is Nellie Bly?
Nellie Bly
She's fascinating.
is
Really?
she is a
What do you know about
reporter.
her?
She was the reporter. She got herself admitted to a mental institution and then wrote this whole like expose about the way mental institutions treat
people
their
are-
patients.
Yeah. Ooh, smart.
Yeah. Like serious investigative reporting.
Yeah, she like
Oh,
she
pre
basically
1900s.
so she went into the jail because she heard about Emma Goldman and she interviewed her, and she wrote this big expose on her in her newspaper, calling her the modern day Joan of Arc because of her work with workers. And this basically like makes Emma Goldman famous across the United States. So when she gets out of jail, she essentially starts like touring the world in order to speak to the masses.
Yeah.
She goes off to speak to workers across the world about getting their rights. And during one of these travels, she decides to stop in Vienna, where she gets 2 diplomas in medicine.
Was she actually like studying, or they were just like,
Somebody probably invited her to attend school there. She became a midwife.
Amazing.
And when she came back to the United States, she was practiced midwifery. During her travels, she meets internationally acclaimed anarchist thinkers, and in 1900 she arranges the first International Anarchist Congress, which meets on the outskirts of Paris. So during these speeches, it seems like she is really joining her anarchist principles of direct action to the struggles of like the working class and labor unions, and making it clear to them that they are able to advocate for themselves against harsh working conditions. This is like her growth from like basically trying to like blow up people to advocate for workers. Around this time, an unemployed factory worker named
Leon Czolgosz.
that's him, attends one of Goldman's speeches and is greatly moved by her words. Czolgosz tries to become friends with Goldman and her companions. He starts showing up randomly at their house and asking weird questions about their books that they're reading, their philosophies that they're into, and they basically all assume he's an undercover cop trying to infiltrate their group.
Of course. It's like, what are you doing at my house?
Yeah.
Quit trying to be the feds.
Yeah, like, I don't want you to be the head of my security.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they turn him away, and nobody thinks about him again until September 6th, 1901, when Czolgosz shows up at a speaking event for the president, William McKinley, and he shoots him twice, once in the chest and once in the stomach. When he's interrogated, Czolgosz claims he was inspired after attending one of Goldman's speeches, and that is enough for the police to arrest Goldman and charge her with plotting the assassination of the president.
Wow.
Which is crazy because at this point, her philosophy has really expanded and she's speaking on the world stage. There is no chance that she was telling people to go kill the president.
Yeah, she did nothing to encourage this. And I think I remember reading when I talked about Czolgosz in the Auburn prison episode that they tried to associate her with this assassination plot, and ultimately they just couldn't find anything. So I cut it out of my outline because I'm like, she's clearly not involved in this assassination attempt in any way.
Yeah, and she wasn't.
Yeah.
So they eventually released her. However, she's such a badass. During her interrogation, they're like peppering her with questions, and she knows that they don't have anything on her, but she's like, if President McKinley does need health care at this time, I can provide that health care because the president is merely a human after all.
That's amazing.
Yes, I love her. Although she's innocent of any involvement in this assassination, that doesn't stop the government from running an effective smear campaign against her. Mm-hmm. While she was once considered the modern-day Joan of Arc, she's now vilified across the country, and even her closest allies start to turn against her, alleging that she has hurt the cause of workers across the country. That's basically the story of Emma Goldman, like the beginning of the story of her. After the assassination of the president, she fades out of the public spotlight for a time. She eventually reemerges during the time of the Palmer raids. Meanwhile, she was doing lots of other awesome shit on the DL, like being a champion for free speech and fighting the Anarchist Exclusion Act in the Supreme Court. As I mentioned before, she starts a popular magazine called Mother Earth, a liberal...
What's the Anarchist Exclusion Act?
The Anarchist Exclusion Act, I don't have a definition here.
Okay.
But I think it's essentially that if you are an anarchist and you are acting against the will of our country, then you can no longer be a citizen of this country.
And they send you where?
They are able
Mother
to
Russia.
deport you.
An undisclosed location.
To X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Wow. And
Yes. During this time, there were all kinds of acts and things being passed by the government that were later revoked. There were a lot of things that made American citizens, but especially immigrants, unable to speak against the United States government. One of those things was the Anarchist Act.
Okay.
And then the Sedition Act and other acts were added on top of that, basically to legalize and justify actions against immigrants in the country. Yeah. But it really seems like the government does what the government wants to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as I mentioned, she starts a popular journal called Mother Earth. She tours the country teaching women about birth control, and then, wait for it, her star-crossed lover, Alexander Berkman, who had tried to assassinate Frick, he's released from jail. So they meet up again.
And they're like this?
Yes. They're
I'm pressing my fingers together, you guys.
They're trying to smooch. They actually try to smooch, but they're like, wow, we're not super into each other anymore, but we're still friends. They're lifelong friends, though. Yeah. They're one of these.
I'm because this feels like a swerve, but
they're
I'm
not
glad
doing any
that they're...
penis and vagina.
They're not doing the penis and vagina.
It's called PIV. PIV, get with it. You've never... No. Of course you've never... You're like, what? PIV is a thing.
God, my pearls.
They're clutched.
Fuck.
So Alexander Berkman fresh out of jail, goes to work for Emma Goldman, and he is the editor for her magazine Mother Earth, and under his editorial powers, the magazine increases its subscription rate and is doing better than it's ever done before. They have like 10,000 subscribers across the United States. Around this time, Congress passes the Selective Service Act of 1917.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Which requires all males aged 21 to 30 to register for military conscription. Emma Goldman sees this decision as an exercise of military aggression driven by capitalism. She's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
Her philosophy dictates that she speak out against it, and she publicly declares in her magazine Mother Earth that she intends to resist the Conscription Act and oppose U.S. involvement abroad in war.
Ooh.
She
Strong statement.
Right? Yes.
Ooh.
And I think if she had only said it in her paper, she would have been okay.
Oh,
but,
because there weren't that many people like subscribed to her paper.
well, there were 10,000 people subscribed to her paper, but that would have been a freedom of speech issue. But then her and Alexander Berkman went on to organize the No Conscription League of New York, which proclaims, basically as its manifesto, we oppose conscription because we are internationalists, anti-militarists, and opposed to all wars waged by capitalist governments.
I took this out of my my outline because I didn't really want to get into the Black Panther Party, but their whole thing was like, Black people shouldn't have to go to war because it's like we don't want to war against other like Black and brown people.
Well, and that's exactly like, why are we going to Vietnam to wage war against
poor people?
Yeah, that we're not against in the first place, but the government is.
And I think also this specifically happening at this time, like World War I had just ended.
That's so early.
And these were a lot of immigrants from Eastern Europe who were basically like, we don't want to go back and fight against like our ancestors and our families. But Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman go on to organize the No Conscription League in New York. They are promptly arrested under the newly passed Espionage Act, which states that it is illegal to impede the function of the U.S. military. And when police officers arrive at the offices of Mother Earth to arrest them, Goldman requests to change it to a more appropriate outfit.
I love it.
And as the story goes, she disappears into the back room and reemerges in a royal purple ball gown.
Amazing.
In which she is formally arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison for her anti-conscription work.
I want to see the photos of
Same.
this. Are there photos?
There has to be.
We have to put photos
There
of
has
this on
to be,
there.
yeah.
Did we have color photography?
Well, even if they're black and white,
A ball gown?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
being arrested in a ball gown is
I was thinking
fantastic.
like when you said like, oh, she had to go away to get, like change her outfit. I'm like, please let her be wearing a fur. Please let her be wearing a fur.
So this brings us back to the beginning of the story in 1917. She was arrested in 1917. That same year, back in her native Russia, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, stage a successful revolution to overthrow the Tsar, and they declare Russia to be a republic. This is how the USSR is born, which immediately leads to the United States shitting its pants and terrified that a similar revolution is coming to our shores. And this comes to a full-blown Red Scare in 1919. This is the same year, coincidentally, that Goldman is released from prison. Workers have begun organizing across the country again. World War I has ended. A lot of workers' wages were frozen during World War I.
Yeah.
So a lot of this labor movement was coming out of the war. It really
Exactly.
it didn't have anything to do with like communist sympathizers or like Russian revolutionaries.
They were just trying to live.
Yeah, they were like,
Yeah.
we just need higher wages. We need to be able to afford our rent.
Sure.
But their union activity was quickly labeled by the government as being communist and sympathizing with the Russians.
Communism, just so you guys know, is being paid appropriately for your work.
unacceptable.
Yeah, I've also heard that socialism
Yes.
I mean, socialism, in the minds of at least the right, is all the same.
and,
the same.
and anarchy.
Well, according to this political affiliation scale that we took,
Oh yeah, the agitator.
we are socialist anarchists.
Don't say
And
it.
so also somehow
Don't say it. Libertarian.
the
Don't
L
say
word. You just
Thank
said
you.
it.
God damn it. Tim.
Lesbians.
You yeah, I mean
I wish.
same. Like I'm still crossing my fingers being like one day I'm gonna meet Amy.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm like 62 and it's gonna be great.
Emma.
Yeah, Emma, totally. Amber.
She sounds red.
So enter the newly appointed Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer and his lapdog J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh, fuck that guy.
They are desperate to quell the fears of a red revolution.
Quell, even.
Yes, and J. Edgar Hoover launches a raid in July of 1919 against a small anarchist group in Buffalo, New York. This is kind of like a test case.
It's crazy that he's doing this in 1919.
1919. And then he just, because he's 24 years old.
Yeah, he's spry, you know?
And then he stays in there. He creates the FBI. He finds Fred Hampton and kills him in the 60s and does so much other
69,
bullshit.
Yeah. I didn't know that he had this long of a run.
And such an influence on American politics for so long. In college, he was openly arguing against women having abortions and birth control. He was basically against anything we consider
Progress. Yeah.
And for this, he was made the head of the FBI.
Do we know, like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, because he's advocating against the right things. I'm like, how did he get his job? But yeah, you explained it.
Yeah, and it was because this was the Red Scare in 1919. The Attorney General was appointed in this year. And he was like, I have to do something to
Quell the tide.
to turn the tides and appease the public and please my president. And
Protect the nation.
And I think he
Air
really
quotes.
specifically hired J. Edgar Hoover and appointed him to this newly formed
He's
task
like, I have an
force.
attack dog that I just hired who's young and spry. I love
Exactly.
spry.
Sturdy.
He is a sturdy white man, and he's ready. So J. Edgar Hoover launches a raid in July 1919 against a small anarchist group in Buffalo, New York. It's a 3-person group.
And he's launching a raid against them?
people?
And
Three people? Seriously, though?
This was like a test case. They're,
3 people?
They're immediately released because a federal judge comes and tosses out the case, saying that the arrested radicals were merely proposing to transform the government by using their free speech rights and
Thank
not by
you.
violence.
And they're 3 people.
Yes.
So, like, what are we even doing here today in court?
Surprise, free speech is not a crime.
Yeah.
But this decision made the Attorney General Palmer and Hoover realize that they needed a better law to effectively arrest the radicals around the country. So they consciously decided to exploit the more powerful immigration statutes in place, such as the Anarchist Exclusion Act. They reasoned that this gave them the authority to deport alien anarchists, whether they were being violent or not. However, in order to do this, they still needed to enlist the cooperation of the officials in the Department of Labor. Because, and I didn't know this, apparently there's a thing called due process. And only the Secretary of Labor can issue warrants for the arrest of alien violators of the Immigration Acts. Can
So, like,
sign
federal violations. Okay.
Yes, but there is a specific office in the United States that has to sign deportation orders, and those orders can only be signed following a hearing by an immigration inspector.
Good.
So there's actually
I think
like
that's good, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
actually a
Yeah.
process. I think that
Yeah.
actually is due process.
Definitely, yeah.
is
The
like-
fact that there's a paper trail and
Yes.
like people like weighing in on evidence.
Sounds
Yeah.
great, doesn't it?
What?
Sounds really great. So J. Edgar Hoover successfully persuades the Department of Labor to ease its insistence on properly alerting those arrested of their rights to an attorney. Instead, the Labor Department issues instructions that its representatives could wait until the case against the defendant was established, quote, in order to protect government interests. So, while the Secretary of Labor, who was actually like a decent person, insisted that more than membership in an organization was required for an arrest warrant, Hoover was able to work with more compliant labor officials, and he basically, I feel like this is like a very like Trump Giuliani move. He basically overwhelmed the labor staff with requests to get all of the warrants he wanted. he had a list for 60,000 names.
Oh my God.
Yes.
What?
And many of those names were taken from the offices of Emma Goldman's Mother Earth magazine when they ransacked the office and seized her subscription list.
Jesus
So
Christ.
they're arresting people for being subscribed to a magazine, essentially.
Sorry, everyone who's listening, but someday you're going to be arrested for listening to this podcast.
I mean, maybe. Sorry. It wasn't our intention.
Yeah.
Ugh.
J. Edgar Hoover was eventually successful in gaining warrants for anyone associated with the Union of Russian Workers, also the Communist Party and the Communist Labor Party, which were two different things. What this really meant was that he had carte blanche to arrest whoever he wanted to arrest.
Yeah.
So starting in November 1919 and extending through February 1920 in 70 cities across the United States, the Palmer raids were responsible for arresting 10,000 people. The entire enterprise included arrests and seizures without warrants, as well as detention in overcrowded and unsanitary holding facilities. Hoover later admitted to clear cases of brutality, while the Attorney General claimed that they had taken possession of significant weapons during the raids.
Oh, yes. The
such
weapons.
as bombs.
We found
Yes.
a butter knife.
Yeah.
All the ammunition. all of the
Eventually,
things.
when asked to present evidence of these bombs, they put some ball bearings on a table,
Stop it.
and that was the
They were
last
clearly
anyone
planning on
heard
using
of
that as
bombs.
shrapnel.
Yes.
Wow.
The audacity is
The
incredible.
audacity.
Caucasity.
Thank you. Ball bearings really this is like exhibit A through Z.
After the arrest, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Francis Fisher Kane, resigned in protest to the Palmer raids. In his letter of resignation to the president and to the attorney general, he wrote, quote, "It seems to me that the policy of raids against large numbers of individuals is generally unwise and very apt to result in injustice. People not really guilty are likely to be arrested and railroaded through their hearings. We appear to be attempting to repress a political party. By
Really?
such methods, we drive underground and make dangerous what was not dangerous before."
You
I
don't
love that he
fucking
has
say.
this helicopter view of just what is happening
Yeah.
in the world. They're not dangerous, but we say that they are.
Yes, and when I'm reading this, I didn't know this was the definition of anarchy. And reading this, I'm like, anarchy totally has a place in a healthy democracy.
100%.
Seriously.
Community
Yes.
organizing and
Yes.
ignoring the government is
I mean, that's
totally
how you
fine.
change things for the better for certain people.
The one thing I will say, having just come out of this election,
Oh,
is the anarchists who say that the government is corrupt, you should not vote.
I think it is a valid choice to make that decision
Definitely.
within a democracy. To have a fully functional democracy.
Sure.
I don't
We
think
have to have all points of view.
Exactly. And not everybody is always going to
people who don't believe in the
vote.
system who are trying to tear it down, and people like me who don't believe in the system but want to change it for the better. I think that everyone should have their voice.
Yeah.
Controversial opinion over here.
crazy.
Yeah. No. I mean, I just feel like
Tim
you
edits
can't.
me out.
Sorry.
What voice?
It's just
Black
me and
women
Tux.
talking. It's
Just me and Tux talking the whole episode.
beep.
That's indoctrination.
So Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman had both finished their 2-year stints in prison in 1919.
Oh shit.
And when they got out of jail, they returned to work at the Mother Earth magazine. But one random day, they were rearrested as Russian sympathizers by the police who broke in, part of the Palmer raids. They were immediately brought to Ellis Island, where they were held without legal representation or trials. J. Edgar Hoover was reported to have said, "Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman are, beyond doubt, two of the most dangerous anarchists in this country, and if permitted to return to the community will result in undue harm."
Harm.
Thus, it is no surprise that Goldman's U.S. citizenship, which had been established when she married her husband years before, was suddenly revoked on a technicality.
Wow.
Apparently, her former husband had been arrested years before for something minor, which was enough to cancel his citizenship.
Traffic violation.
And Alexander Berkman, on the other hand, he had never even applied for citizenship when he immigrated from Russia. And at that time, that was like fairly normal.
Absolutely.
The immigration acts of
Yeah.
the 20s hadn't been passed.
Exactly.
You weren't necessarily
You didn't have
under
to.
threat from the government.
This is what everyone was doing.
Yes. So on December 21st, 1919, Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman were loaded under the dark of night onto the USS Buford, also known as the Soviet Ark, and deported to the USSR. Jesus. And that is the scandal of Emma Goldman and the Palmer raids.
That's incredible.
Truly.
You have successfully indoctrinated me.
Yeah.
I now see myself as an anarchist and would like to marry Emma Goldman.
I didn't go into this, but there was a whole press spin on the whole thing.
Of course.
The attorney general was hoping to run for president after this. So
he's like, this is the case that I make my bones on.
So he deported all these people. The press took pictures of them as they were leaving. They called it the Soviet Ark. They cheered that all of these American anarchists were being deported.
I mean, this is propaganda 101.
Yeah, textbook.
This is how you do it. And this is, J. Edgar Hoover was at the reign as a young man is already doing this shit.
Like a Stephen Miller at the time. Yes.
I don't want to talk about Stephen
Miller. We will
Miller.
never speak that name ever again.
Okay, because
he's
a fictional character that I heard about.
Yes.
Okay, you're okay.
He was in a television show.
I'm not going to say how
fascism.
he's trying to get rid of birthright citizenship at all. I'm not going to say that.
It was crazy because after this happened, this nativism in the United States really blew up.
Of course.
And led to these immigration acts, which really did restrict immigration across the United States. But Attorney General Palmer, he thought that he could kind of use this and spin it to get elected president. And instead, because these were lawless acts, essentially, and they arrested 10,000 people, 9,500 of which were released.
This is not a good look.
Yes, it was not a good look. And his party was like, we don't want anything to do with you.
New phone, who dis?
He tried to run for the Democratic primary and was soundly rejected.
I beat him in the primary, you guys. I crushed him.
J. Edgar Hoover, I think, is someone for another time because he had a long storied career.
I feel like there are so many things that came up in this story that we might revisit.
Oh, we will
100%
revisit.
Can we just have a story where we just shit on J. Edgar Hoover?
Can we just do a whole season where just he's trash? Let me count the reasons
but there's
why.
So many people that we could do that about if we wanted to.
No, but J. Edgar did so much. He did
so much
for the culture.
Yeah.
For the culture, he did so much.
Yeah. Thank you for telling that.
Yeah, seriously. Oh my God, I learned so much.
Incredibly enlightening and indoctrinating.
Oh, wait. Can I should also say, before we finish, I learned about this story because I read this book by this woman, Janet Fitch, called The Revolution of Marina M. Janet Fitch also wrote White Oleander.
Oh my God, I love White
Painted Black.
I love that book.
And so this is a 2-part book.
Wow.
The second part of the book is called The Chimes of a Lost Cathedral, but it's a fictional history of a woman in revolutionary Russia who goes through all of this turmoil as the Russian Empire turns into the USSR, is taken over by the Bolsheviks, becomes like a communist country. It's fascinating, and there's so much real history that I didn't even realize was real while I was reading it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Wow.
And she offhandedly...
She's an amazing writer.
Yes. And
wow.
she just mentions Emma Goldman and the USS Buford, and I was like, what's that?
Capital W-U-T.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you for
I look forward to
us.
editing this episode and my drunk ass.
Now you know how I feel.
I think our listeners
episode.
will really appreciate hearing your voice again.
Yeah, they love you.
Please write in to tell us how much you loved hearing from Tim so we can forward it to him, and who will believe us because he doesn't want to believe that you like hearing from him. My cocktail's empty.
Yeah, mine too.
Also mine too.
Mine too. Because they're fucking delicious.
They were good.
And I could drink these. I will order, now that I know what a sidecar is, I will totally order this out at bar, the club. You know, the club that serves
I remember the
sidecars.
club 2019. There was a thing called the club.
You could go outside your house and do things
Yeah,
with people.
and you could like touch people and like not be afraid.
Gross.
It was
I don't-
insane.
I don't want anything to do with that. Whew. All right. Well, America's history is juicy. We just add cognac and Cointreau
Yeah,
and a little bit of lemon
delicious.
juice. Thank you so much for listening to Beyond Reproach. This has been Tux Lurzel,
Stephanie Domingo. Oh,
Why
you're
did I
gonna
do
just like
that?
say my
I
name?
don't
You want
know
to say
why I
my
did
name
that.
too, Tux?
Nope.
Go ahead.
Keep my name out of your mouth.
Yeah.
I'm Stephanie Domingo, and I'm also Tim Cluff.
This has been Tim Cluff. No, thank you so much for listening to Beyond Reproach. This has been Tux Lurzel.
Stephanie Domingo.
Tim Cluff.
Ta-da! We did it.
We
Thank
did
you.
it.
Thank you so much to Tim Cluff. We are very drunk and
Yes.
we've made a mess of things.
But it's okay.
But Tim is a powerful wizard and he will make this sound wonderful and y'all will not even realize.
I was gonna say no. I am completely sober, and Tim will make it so.
Don't ask the impossible of me.
Oh,
Bye.
guys, bye.
Please note that we are not historians. We are just a couple of drunks who never shut up and love history. Full list of all source information can be found in the show notes on our website. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Written reviews are especially important. If you like us, please do one of two things. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or send this episode to a friend, family member, or someone you think would be into it. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Make sure you follow us on Instagram because we post our cocktail recipes the Thursday before each full episode. Please drink along with us if you are not driving. We also have a shop at beyondreproachpod.com. Get your merch, brand yourselves. We are on Patreon if anyone would love to show us some love and throw us some nickels to support the production of our show.